All brought to you by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. John Schmeelk, Paul Dottino. We're going to lead off with our own very Madeline Burke today, which Paul and I were kind of scouring what was going on during the media availabilities. Madeline, let's start with that. What kind of jumped out at you? We had the linebackers and defensive linemen and edge players on the podium this morning.
Lots of big names and big guys on the podium this morning, and I think there's a lot of storylines that people who've been following the draft prospect loosely are aware of, but the ones that stood out to me were the ones with a little bit of the Giants tie. Of course, Michigan D lineman Josiah Stewart, he's from the Bronx. He grew up a Giants fan. He talked about how he remembered watching the Super Bowls, the 2007 team, the 2011 team that won, and then he went and moved to Boston when he was younger, and he loved talking smack to people in Boston about those. And then, of course, Howard Cross III, son of Howard Cross, BBK, longtime viewers and Giants fans know, former Giants tight end. Howard Cross III, of course, out of Notre Dame, talked at the podium. It was great to see. And for a guy who, we know well and we've watched grow up, but for a guy who grew up around the game of football and around the Giants organization, just the awe and the realization of the magnitude of this moment in his career was not lost on him, and it was great. It was a great moment.
Paul, anything jump out at you?
Yeah, the one thing visually, and we'll get into some of the details of the players later, but the one thing visually that was just incredibly stark, if you looked at one corner of the room where the kickers came out, folks, it looked like the circus. You had the little guys who all smash into that Volkswagen, right? And then they come out, about 20 of them come out of the Volkswagen. And then you got the elephants.
You mean the Cadillac, Paul, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Well, Cadillacs don't make them that small, though.
Yeah.
Cadillacs are big. The stark contrast as you looked against the wall of the D linemen at the podium compared to the kickers at the podium, you'd swear the kickers were just coming out of high school. That's how small they looked. It was just a funny scene to look at.
And I'll just say, I think the different sizes of the defensive tackles, too. Like, you can tell, even though they play the same position, you have 50, 60 pounds worth of stress. Like, Kenneth Grant came out later, massive human being.
Kenneth Grant needs 2 podiums, John.
He's
so big.
He's a Dexter Lawrence size of player. Then you have a guy like Walter Nolan who came out, he's 285. So it's just different guys at different sizes that I think it's stark when you see them kind of stand next to each other.
And we've got to talk about Abdul Carter as well. Abdul Carter spoke to the media today. He said, without a doubt, I believe I'm the best player in this draft class, and the best player should be drafted number 1. He is very confident, thinks he should be drafted first overall, thinks he brings the most value. And he talked about how, hey, listen, defensive players bring as much value to a team as quarterbacks do, saying that he wants people to be more real, or to realize that a bit more, and saying, yes, a lot of the focus is on the quarterback and on the impact of that position, but he wants people to realize the talent that he can bring and the amount that he can change a roster.
And this is one of the deepest positions in the draft, too, edge and defensive tackle. That's going to be the majority of the players picked in the top 100, so it was good to kind of get a feel for those guys today.
The feel that I was unhappy to get, and I don't mind telling you this because all of our viewers know how much I love Mason Graham. When you see him and talk to him in person, it's not the guy you see on tape. The guy you see on tape.
So often, though, that's the case, right, Paul?
He's also not super impressive physically either. Like, he's not exactly. No. But his tape's awesome.
He looks more like Clark Kent than he does Superman.
Right. Well, he puts on the cape when he goes on the field.
And when he's on the field, the motor is incredibly hot.
Yeah.
He can't be blocked. He's violent. He's vicious. He's fast. He's energetic. Almost as energetic as me.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we want anyone as energetic.
I don't know. That's a high bar to set, Paul. This man doesn't even drink caffeine.
But when you talk to him, he's like, all right, whatever, all shucks. He's almost like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo.
The references already to start the show. I love it.
Well, come on. Scooby-Doo's not that old.
No. And they're still making new Scooby-Doo. So
there
that's
you
fine.
go. All right, see?
That's fine.
There you go.
Madeline, good stuff. Appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. We'll let you go have
we'll talk to you tomorrow. All right, let's take a quick timeout. Paul Schwartz from the New York Post will join us next right here on Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac.
It's a thread.
A love affair. I fell in love with the Giants. I saw LT run the touchdown back when they played the Detroit Lions.
Picked off by Lawrence Taylor. Pass down. Phil Simms was my dad's guy.
From generation?
Eli was my guy. To generation.
We are
The New York Giants.
We got some cilantro, some onions, some carrots.
Giving back to the community means a lot. Just to keep giving hope that, you know, you just live in a situation, the situation doesn't define you.
So, I got you.
Thank y'all.
You're welcome.
So nice of y'all.
Oh, thank you.
Just little things like that just to keep encouraging guys.
We're back here on Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac. The Giants NFL Combine coverage is presented by the Hospital for Special Surgery, the world's #1 in orthopedics. Choose better, move better. HSS, the official hospital of the New York Football Giants. Schmeelk, Dottino, we welcome in Paul Schwartz, who's covered the Giants. Technically, is forever accurate or no for the New York Post?
I don't think technically forever is a technical term.
Spiritually, forever.
I just completed my 31st year.
Is it really 31st, huh?
It's really my 31st. Yes,
that's pretty good.
Yes.
All right, so you've heard many GMs talk and say things. Give me your take on what you heard from. What was your main takeaway and thing that you had top of mind, more specific than just quarterback, when you walked away from Joe Shane's 30 minutes or so with the media on Tuesday?
Well, it's almost hard to separate quarterbacks. I mean, there was so much talk about the quarterbacks. Look, when a guy comes behind a podium and a microphone, you are either talking from a position of strength or a position of weakness, I think, for the most part. In politics, in sports, in life, right? When you are asked to be behind a microphone, what position are you coming from? Joe Shane is coming this year from a position of weakness as far as 3 wins, retained his job, but it's you know, I mean, everyone knows the deal. No, it doesn't even have to be spelled out. You need to do better. You know, the whole operation needs to do better. So there's not a bravado. There's not a real sense of great confidence. I think there's a real concern that they know they need a starting quarterback, and they're not sure they can get one that they want, a real good one, because of where they are in the draft, because what free agency is, because whether Matt Stafford gets traded or not. So I think it's a real tenuous situation. I really do. I mean, I think Joe did well. I think his attitude was good. He didn't, he said, look, everyone knows our depth chart. We need a quarterback. We need 2 of them.
And not just any quarterback. And I think I think you make a good point, Paul, where it's not like, all right, well, we need a guy that we can plug in there and start for 17 games. They need somebody that can, and Joe kind of mentioned this when he talked about the drafted players, but I think it applies to the free agents too. You want a quarterback that can elevate the other people around you, and that isn't just going to be elevated by the talent around him. They want a quarterback that's going to raise the ships.
They want a good quarterback who can win games and be their franchise quarterback. You know, whether you want to say, you know, your definition of a good quarterback is he can elevate around them. Yes, my definition could be he wins games, you know, in the fourth quarter. You know, yes, whatever it is.
Are you a truck or you're a trailer? They want a truck. They don't want a trailer that's going to get dragged along by
We all know what they look like. Right. We all know what they look like. And as Joe said, one of his good lines is you can't just go pick one off the franchise quarterback tree. You know, there's put it this way, there's 32 teams that need, you know, so every team has a starting quarterback, right? How many, seriously, Paul, let me ask this, how many are there in the league or potentially in the draft who you would say, I want that guy?
Well, let's put it this way. I'm going to go and tell you this. Somebody said to me the other day there are probably 10 teams in this league right now who would like to upgrade their starting quarterback, and there's not enough to go around in this offseason.
Oh, I think 10 might be a low. I think 10 might be a low number, to be honest with you.
I mean, you shuffle the chairs. You know what I mean? This guy's not good, but we'll try him over here. This guy failed here. You know, Sam Darnold, but we'll try him here. Wow, that was a great success. See, the problem with that is the Sam Darnold model almost doesn't exist. There is no model where a guy fails and then comes back and is spectacularly good for a long segment of the time. That you can't bank on that to happen with these guys.
No, it's hard.
There are riverboat gamblers who will tell you, oh, why don't you take a shot at Zach Wilson? Why don't you take a shot at Trey Lance? Why don't you take a shot at Justin Fields, who haven't exactly done a whole lot of really great things in their early tenure in the league?
Well, you know what? You have to take a shot, but you have to have backup plans too. Look, the Giants are in a position right now where they have to do anything and everything. Like he said, I believe in taking swings. He didn't say I believe to go up there and bunt, right? You're a big baseball guy, right? Remember when bunting used to be a big thing, right? You know.
In other words, he's going to be Reggie Jackson,
and it isn't just
he's going to swing.
And it wasn't just take one swing. He said keep taking swings.
You keep taking swings, and you know what? I didn't always believe that philosophy, but with the Giants, you have to. You can't just say, "This is my guy. I'm going to ride with him." You say, "I'm taking this guy, and I'm bringing this guy in. I'm bringing this guy in," and hopefully one of them hits. And if they don't, we got to bring in other guys. You have to find one.
So this is where I am now, and I think this is where it gets a little complicated, and then we'll pivot off a quarterback. We'll go elsewhere. Free agency comes first, right?
Yes.
And I thought the interesting thing that Joe talked about is that you kind of have to figure out now in the next, I guess what is today, Wednesday, so 12 days, what the draft looks like at quarterback, who you think you can get.
Right.
And that's going to impact what you can do in free agency, right? Like if they conclude in 12 days that neither Shador or Cam Ward or anyone else they think can be the Giants franchise quarterback, well then they have to be more aggressive in free agency, more aggressive on the trade market. But if they believe one of those guys can be it, and maybe they have enough discussions with Tennessee where they feel confident they can manage to trade up or something like that, then maybe you don't have to be as aggressive in free agency. So I imagine, and I have not talked to anybody, Paul, they're probably going to try to get both quarterbacks in for 30 visits next week, would be my bet, just so they kind of get in front of them and get their evaluation done. How do you think that's going to go in terms of their aggression level next week in terms of really figuring out what they're going to do at quarterback, because the clock is literally ticking?
Yes, in an ideal world, you would have the draft and then have free agency in this particular case, right? If you can't get them, then you sign one. That's not the case. That's not the way it works. What do I think? I think that they will not know. You can't know. I mean, are the Titans and Browns going to quietly go to Joe Schoen and say, we're taking a quarterback? We're not taking a quarterback. They cannot know that. All they know is they're at 3, right? And the top 2 guys, there's no guarantee they will be there. And I don't know this. I don't know if the top 2 guys are really the top 1 guy.
I think that's a really good question.
I think there is a top 1 guy.
I agree with you.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a top 1 guy, and it's Cam Ward.
Talking to people this week, that seems to be what the consensus is.
And so there's no way the Giants can be confident that they can stay in 3 and get him. They cannot know that. They will not know that. And so I think the phrase I heard is bird in the hand.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Wait.
Right.
So you know what? Here's what happens is the worst case scenario, or the best case scenario is you get one in free agency, right? There's not a lot of them, but you get one who you feel I can win with him. With some help, I can win with him, and then the draft shakes down in a different way. You know what? Take him.
Sorry, Paul, I lied. I have to do one follow-up.
Take him.
How about the trade market?
Well, the trade market is Stafford, if he's available, and you know that's the thing of it. We don't even know if he's available. We don't know if he's available. I mean, let me ask you 2 guys right now. Right now, if you had to bet $100, is Stafford with the Rams next year?
Yes.
Probably not.
I think no. You know why? Just because there's too much of this. There's too much. I mean,
it is very loud.
I heard
it's very loud.
The Rams would have shut this down quite a ways ago, and emphatically, if it was not going to happen.
The only thing is them saying, okay, you can go search a deal, see what you're worth out there.
That's my point.
And maybe he comes back and says, yeah, you're right. I can't get 50, so I'll come back to you for whatever it is. Look, it's not the ideal fit for the Giants. He's 37 years old. He also would be unquestionably the best quarterback they've had since Eli Manning in his prime. Mm-hmm. He just would be.
And not even close.
Not even close. Yeah. I mean, Matt Stafford in his prime was better than Eli Manning, other than, 2 playoff runs. So, they have to find someone to win. This whole operation needs to win. They're coming. They went from 9 to 6 to 3. I don't know if any of us were math majors here, but I sense that is a depreciating scale right there, and that cannot continue.
All right, Paul, let me go for a second to Giants free agents. Yeah. Jason Pinnock, biggest name on defense. Darius Slayton, biggest name on offense. What do you suppose is going to happen to those guys?
I want to throw Greg Van Roten in the mix there, too, because he was a starter.
All right, you could. So how do you suppose the Giants deal with those guys, or do they have holes to fill because those guys will go away?
Well, Joe Shane mentioned a few times about right guard, and that Van Roten. It's interesting. Joe basically came out and said we have 4 starters coming back. Right? That's what he said. We have 4 starters coming back. We have 1 hole to fill.
He's actually said that since the end of the season.
Yeah. So my sense is they will sign a right guard. That is my sense. That they have money. They're not going to sign one for $25 million a year. They will sign a right guard. I don't think they're going to go in and stay in-house with that. They tried that already. They'll sign a Runyon-esque right guard will be my impression, maybe slightly less. That's my sense. Could be wrong. So I think as far as the wide receiver, they love Wan'Dale Robinson, obviously Malik Neighbors. So I think that's a third receiver. It just seems to me kind of that Darius Slayton's time is kind of. It just seems like it should be over. I mean, they brought him back. I mean, he's had more lives already, and I love Darius. I think he's a great player. Not a great player. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a very solid wide receiver. But you know what you're getting with him, and it seems to me that he probably would be better off going somewhere else. How about, and by the end of the year, didn't you feel that I felt it? That one year where he said, remember when he sat in his locker after a game and he said, it's exhausting. It's exhausting to have to answer questions about why we only scored 10 points and we didn't have this many first downs. So he probably should go to a team with a more dynamic passing offense. I would welcome him back, certainly. Pinnock, at this time last year we were speculating about Xavier McKinney, right? And they were not going to go into that market. I think if you mentioned to Joe Shane Pinnock, you know what I think he would say? Nubin. I think he would say, we got a safety.
You need 2 of them, though.
I know you do, but I think they think Nubin is an emerging leader. Too bad he got hurt near the end of the year. I mean, I have no real conviction on whether they bring Pinnock back. I really don't.
Let me give you an equation on this.
I think they could go with like a veteran guy. Now, Pinnock is sort of a veteran, so I get that.
Yeah. Well, I found it interesting that last year, Belton was in the mix. Yeah. And yet in spring training, obviously summer camp.
Well, the bunting thing got you crazy.
I know, it really did. But he could not seize a starting job.
No.
Because Pinnock and Nubin were just too good. So Belton had to continue being the third safety in the mix. Well, I think that's probably a little disappointing to them, and that probably would also tell me that perhaps they don't want to take a gamble that they may have to rely on Belton and therefore go out and get somebody.
That safety position has always been one of those positions where you sign a veteran, right? You sign a 30-year-old veteran, a 20-year veteran, a wise head.
The Logan Ryans of the world.
I mean, the Giants have done this for years. They've signed a guy. He's he's a good player, but he's a good team. He's just a good team guy. That's the center fielder type of thing. I think it would be good for Nubin. I could see them doing that. That's what Joe Shane thinks of that spot. He doesn't think of signing a guy for big money. Sign a guy who can come in and play, be a good player. Then you have Belton as the third guy. I mean, that would be my guess. I mean, I don't know if Pinnock did enough last year to say we definitely want to re-sign him.
How do you think they're going to address some of their holes on defense, corner, and the other defensive tackle spots specifically? Are those, I think you have to bring in a veteran corner. I don't know if you want to throw another young guy in that room, in a room full of also very young guys. And then defensive tackle for that spot next to Dexter Lawrence, trying to be better against the run.
Well, we talked about this earlier off camera that this is a draft of defensive tackles. So you can get one in the third. You can get one in the third round who could likely start for you, so that's a good thing. Corner, well, if Travis Hunter's on the board, you want to bring in a veteran corner. If Travis Hunter's on the board and the quarterback situation is extinguished, he's only like a generational prospect. Now, I'm not buying the returner and receiver part of it. I don't think they're drafting a cornerback number 3 and then telling him, oh, by the way, go return punts. That ain't happening. But he's a damn good cornerback, right? And so, I mean, he comes in, he changes your defense dynamically. So, veteran good, Travis Hunter, as long as you have a quarterback.
Paul, good stuff, my friend.
Man.
Always a pleasure. Paul Schwartz of the New York Post. We'll come back with Charles Davis from NFL Network when we return.
2, 1,
Great job.
You got to get padded up. Let's do it.
Wow, what a catch! Ridiculous!
All right.
I'll show you my hair. This is my bedroom.
I'm leaving. Yeah, I'm freaked out a little bit. Good meeting you, Pete.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here.
Where the
are you? What kind of piece of show is this? This wouldn't happen on Kimmel.
Year 2, and I finally got an invitation, so thank you.
Well, you know we're here to race, though.
Yeah, but we're not going to race this car.
Oh, no.
Killer. Hey, how are you? Hi. I'm Kayvon. Nice to meet you.
For me, it's just a blessing to always be that impact for somebody else. I always say try to be somebody to somebody. So when I go, I want my feet and my hands to move just as fast, right? It's been great getting to learn a lot, getting to meet a lot of kids. It kind of reminds you of where you used to be, and it reminds you of the impact that people have in your life.
There you go.
I think we had a tremendous impact on them, just being able to bring them a smile on the day and be able to, really interact with them and get to know them.
And one more. Hey.
Really getting to step back and enjoy the moment.
10 seconds. All right, we're back here on Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants. Schmeelk, Dottino, bringing in friend of the program, Charles Davis. You know him from NFL Network, and of course his great work calling NFL games on the weekend. Charles, how are you, man?
I'm great. It's great to see both of you again. Love the way you worked that mic. I mean, that is pretty strong right there. Well, that is no Gene Rayburn long stick mic like that. That's the real deal right
now,
there.
I have some back spasms, so the lean forward is usually not the best thing for me, so I got to do the lean back with the mic.
And maneuver where you want to. These things look like the original cell phones. Remember those big brick cell phones?
Oh, wow.
Remember those? You remember those bad boys? And 10 people had them, and you knew if they had them, they had money.
Yes, sir.
All right?
Zach Moore, Saved by the Bell, man.
They had money.
All right, so, Charles, today we talked to a lot of the defensive linemen, the edge players, and the linebackers. What's your overall takeaway from the group? This is one of the better groups at those two spots that I've seen in a while. I mean, you could look at probably a third of the first 100 guys off the board, I think, could come from these position groups. Your thoughts with some of the one-on-ones you did with them on SiriusXM today?
Yeah, it's exactly what you described. Did you remember last year when we get our first defensive player? 15?
Yeah, I think it was Latu, right?
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
At 15, I don't think we're going to be waiting that long this time. Big people, fast people, strong people. What's interesting is Abdul Carter is obviously the number one edge guy, right, coming out of Penn State. And you guys, I mean, Penn State is essentially, like, for the longest time, is like New York State's college team. Yeah, you know, I know the people at Syracuse, I don't want to be upset with me, but Penn State dominated that cycle. Syracuse was playing catch-up during that time frame. This kid coming out of Penn State, he wears 11 like Parsons did. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's Micah Parsons, but he's as close to it as they've had, because they've had pass rushers. Adafe Owe, remember he was Jason Owe coming out. You remember his senior year?
Yeah.
0 sacks, right? Last year, Chop Robinson came out. Dynamic, excellent player. Had a really good second half of the year, I thought, with Miami. It's like 4.5.
Right.
And I was always wondering, well, okay, how come we're not translating this talent into those numbers? Like, usually the numbers in college show up. We don't have that problem with Abdul Carter. Okay, that problem is not an issue. 23.5 from tackles for loss, 12.5 sacks. He's getting the numbers and everything going with it. There's a reason he's number one pass rusher in this draft, and for some people, the number one overall player in this draft.
Now, if he's the number one guy, and I agree, everybody obviously feels that way in terms of the front, Mason Graham has got to be the guy who's right behind him at number 2, and John knows how much I love him. But I will tell you something, Charles. After seeing him at the podium, in person, he doesn't look as imposing.
It throws you, doesn't it?
He doesn't sound as imposing. He doesn't seem as energetic. But look at the tape.
The tape. Yeah, and thank goodness we have the tape, right? Because we always talk about guys who look good on the hoof. Guys come off the bus first.
The bus guys, yeah.
Right? Who was that kid we had out of Maryland a bunch of years ago? The Raiders took in the four. Was it Bruce Campbell? Remember he had that monster combine here and the whole deal? Had not played really well in college. Turned out he didn't play really well in the NFL. But boy, did he look the part.
Look like Tarzan plays like Jane, which is something Parcells always used to say.
But with but with Mason Graham, I don't care. Because just what you said, you turn on that tape and watch his punch and heavy hands.
he's just ruining people up front. Like, people are taking blows, and wrestling background, low center of gravity, plays with leverage. And the one thing about those wrestlers, they are so used to one-on-one combat, and they don't like losing.
Right.
Give me Mason Graham all day long. I don't care what he looked like up there. I don't care how it looked. He's the kid I want because I've seen it on tape for all these years.
And Tyree Wilson, the other guy, the really tall defense.
Right, looked the part, has not produced yet for the Raiders. Hoping he can have a breakout, but he has not lived up to his draft status as of yet.
So I think the interesting spot is after you get past Abdul Carter, I think there's a really good discussion as to who the next guy up is. And what I like about this edge class, Charles, is that you have guys that are shaped a lot of different ways.
They really are, aren't they?
Shamar Stewart is like 285-pound Adonis.
Yep.
Right. Then you have Mike Green out of Marshall, who's a smaller 250-pound guy. Josiah Stewart's even smaller than that.
Yes.
So you have guys that are kind of different shapes and sizes. Some have production, some don't. Ezaraku has great production, not the biggest guy. Stewart, like 1.5 sacks like his whole college career, but he's going to blow up the combine.
And he's going to look the part. And you're going to have to go back and watch tape again and try and answer your question. Why did we not get more? It's a tough one, isn't it? It's a minefield that you go through. Would it be as simple as say as those general managers like to draft on traits? They will fall in love with a lot of the traits guys have. It's those who like to draft on production. We have the production guys as well. It'd be interesting to go, because you remember when Trayvon Walker went #1 overall instead of Aiden Hutchinson. Right. That was very much a traits versus production type of a deal.
And dude, I'm not going to lie. Like, Shamar Stewart's going to test and look just like Trayvon Walker.
And he's going to look the part, and who's going to be the one that goes there? Now, will they go there instead of the so-called productive guy? That'll be interesting to watch. Sure. Because last thing I'll say is, when Joey Bosa came out, you remember the big conversation was, he's clearly this guy, but has he topped out, and is he twitchy enough, and is he this? And people started to put all this doubt.
Dude, it was the same
before Joey Bosa ran into a few injuries, Joey Bosa was getting you 12 a year.
Yeah, it was the same thing with Aiden Hutchinson, by the way.
Right, same conversation.
And I take the hit on that, because I was one of the guys, I'm like, he wins the same way with his hands every time. Where's like the bend and the burst? It doesn't matter. The guy's a monster.
We used to have that discussion inside with Gerald McCoy versus Ndamukong Suh.
Oh, wow.
But remember, everyone won on that one.
Yeah,
everyone won.
Everyone's a winner.
Everyone won on that one.
This is a good question specifically for you, Charles, because you do cover the NFL and you do cover college football as well. There's always that copycat stuff.
Yeah.
And right now, everybody is so enamored with the trenches and the Eagles' defensive line.
Yes.
Is that why we are now putting a greater spotlight and microscope on this defensive tackle class and maybe noticing their positive traits more than we would have otherwise?
I think it's a great point. I think that it has been helped by what we're seeing with Philadelphia. I think really it should have been a reminder that we all should be thinking offensive, defensive line anyway. I don't know why we're getting away from that to begin. But I think that you're right. The other part is, last year we had 6 quarterbacks go in the top 12. And none of us were surprised by that. This year we are not. So guess what? Other positions are going to get much more emphasis. But I think it's well taken what you're saying. Philadelphia has created that, hey, who are these big people who are blowing people up and knocking people back? Look, Josh Sweat's Super Bowl, it should pay off handsomely for him.
Yeah.
And Milton Williams.
Milton Williams now has jumped up, and all these guys had that type of a game. It makes you go back and go, okay, but you got to be somewhat careful. Because remember Larry Brown in the secondary with his Super Bowl?
Oh, wow. Sure do.
Got paid big money,
James
didn't he?
Washington, too, right? Off of his Super Bowl MVP, right? Or the 2 fumble recoveries, whatever he had in that game?
I mean,
same deal.
That's what happens sometimes, and I'm not saying they were bad, but what happens is you get that type of a contract. Now maybe you can't play to that level.
You get the Super Bowl bump. It happens all the time.
Happens a lot.
Second round defensive tackle, Charles, which is one of the give me your pet guy. Who's the guy you really like from this defensive tackle group on day 2? Because the Giants need a lot of help in that spot.
Okay.
You got your notes.
All right, I got my notes.
Yes.
This Caldwell kid out of Oregon, Jamari Caldwell.
He's a big boy.
Woo! Is he something, huh? He's something. But did you see his movement? This kid's got a little...
I saw him at senior.
Right, he's got a little something that goes right there, right? I was taking these notes. The kid that played next to Mason Graham is Kenneth Grant.
Oh,
Michigan.
boy.
He's a good player, too, now.
I said to John, he takes up 2 podiums.
Yeah, he really did.
He looks like Dexter Lawrence.
Right?
That's what he looks like.
He is a big, massive guy. Speaking of massive, Deion Walker. from Kentucky. Have you seen?
Can you give me 2023 Deion Walker instead of 2024 Deion Walker? And then I'm all in.
Right? We would all like to be in. But you see why you fall in love. It's not just his size. He'll throw that spin. He'll throw a spin move on you when he's at his best. I watched him in the Senior Bowl chase a play out into the flat and try and make a play out in the open field. Sometimes if you don't have that year that you want, you come back the next year, right? And now you're at the Senior Bowl. Now you start to see it again. Right? I played with Reggie White at Tennessee. I was lucky enough to be in the secondary my freshman year, his senior year. It all came together because he was a senior. It had to happen now. It all worked, and we were like, God, if we could have had that Reggie for the first 3 years. But also remember, as college kids, you have to grow. You have to go through some things. Sometimes you have things that we'll never know about that take you out of your game a little bit. Someone said to me today, if your work and life balance is not in tune, I don't care who you are or what age you are, it's not going to work. Sometimes there's things going on with these kids we just don't know about. But I liked him. I will say this. Have you guys seen Jordan Phillips, Maryland?
I like him. I actually talked to him. I talked to him about 7 minutes.
That's another one. I love sitting and talking to you guys because you guys always have the guys down. And it's nice for me to bounce some stuff off.
And he's not the most physically imposing guy.
He's really not.
But
he's really active. He move, right?
And very stout, though. He's strong.
And he plays upfield, right? And I'll leave you with this. I don't know what round he's going to go. But I am so curious about Tonka Hemingway at South Carolina. Have you guys seen him play Wildcat quarterback?
No.
When you get a chance, plug in the tape and watch him do some Wildcat stuff. Typically at that size, when you play Wildcat, you take the ball and you run behind big people and you try and create rubble, right? This kid's jump cutting on people.
Get out of here.
I kid you not.
I gotta
Call
watch
me and tell me I'm wrong when you watch it.
I will text you when I watch it.
Call me and tell
30
me.
seconds.
There's one time when he went on a fake punt. He was on the end. He went out for the pass, covered on the pass. The guy throws the ball anyway. He throws a paw out and calls it in.
That's insane.
So I want to see the rest of it. Now, I saw some stuff on defense. But I'm just saying, athletically, he's gifted.
All right, security wants to get you out of here,
Yeah,
but I need 30 seconds on Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
Corner, receiver. Come on. You know both sides of the fence.
He can go either way for me. I have no problem with that. He's going to choose one. He's going to have to because he'll be able to play the other in spots, but he can't play the full time. It's a different league. Chuck Bednarik's not walking through that door anymore.
Or Roy Green.
Right, Roy Green. It's just a hard go. Now, I really shouldn't turn him down because he's proven me wrong before, but I just think the best thing for him, pick one, be a master of it, and go. I don't want him to be in a spot where he's just trying to go back and forth too much. Once he masters it, he can do it. I think most ownership's going to want to play receiver.
And isn't he going to want to do that too because of the contract?
I think people want to see that kid score touchdowns and put butts in the seats and have better retention for the
I want him at corner, Charles.
I know. Listen, what do you think I wanted?
I like his corner tape better.
I like his corner tape a lot. I think his receiver tape is really good, but I think he's going to be a receiver. I think whoever drafts him. Now, some people may like him at corner, but I really think when ownership gets involved, if you have active ownership, I think they're going to want him to play a receiver.
Charles, enjoy the rest of your day,
Great
man.
to see
Appreciate
you,
it. You can check him out on NFL Network. He's on Sirius XM in the morning. He's going to have all the combine coverage, the workouts, all that this week on NFL Network. Check it out. We'll be back with more after this.
All right, Sean, we got 335 max base. We got X post, okay? Here's the post signal. I gave you the post signal. Give me a good fake right behind me.
I got you.
All right, wide 18. All right, this side. Oh, right there. Oh, he looks. He's open.
Go get it. Go get it.
Oh! Let's go! It's the post route. Let's go!
That was awesome. Great route. Money. That was money. I think it just scattered.
Yes.
Oh, that was awesome.
Oh, let's go.
Woo. That was. You want to go for it?
I didn't cross the line, O'Hara. I didn't cross the line.
Nice.
It's a thread.
A love affair. I fell in love with the Giants. I saw LT run the touchdown back when they played the Detroit Lions.
Pass down. Phil Simms was my dad's guy.
From generation.
Eli was my guy. To generation.
Giant Special.
We are
The New York Giants.
We got some cilantro, some onions, some carrots.
Giving back to the community means a lot. Just to keep giving hope that, you know, you just live in a situation, the situation doesn't define you.
So, I got you.
Thank y'all.
You're welcome.
Seriously. So nice of y'all.
Thank you.
Just little things like that just to keep encouraging guys.
All right, we're back here on Big Blue Kickoff Live, brought to you by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants at the Combine in Indianapolis. We thank Charles Davis from NFL Network for joining us. We're going to have Trevor Sikkema slide in here in just a second, and we're going to do a little offensive line DB stuff with him, Paul, because we haven't really touched on those groups a ton yet. As we've kind of talked about these positions, as we've had the conversation. All right, Trevor, you ready to do your Chris Collinsworth slide-in impression? Are you ready to do the slide?
Yeah, I got you.
Look at that. There we go. He got the slide.
That was smooth.
I've had a lot of practice watching the Boss Man. So,
our guy Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus. You have the. We only got 15 minutes with you. I don't want to list all the podcasts that you host because I feel like I might run out of time. Do you want to give us just the people a feature for what they should check out?
Any of the PFF NFL shows, the PFF Draft Guide, and then of course the NFL Stock Exchange podcast as well.
Yeah, we're going to have your boy Connor on in the next couple of days.
There we go.
And I'm sure you've been getting a lot of top of the draft stuff. We're going to dig a little deeper with you here today.
Sure.
And I'm sure you like doing that.
Let's
so
do it.
You want to go O-line first, Paul, or do you want to go cornerback? What do you want to do?
Let's go corner first.
So let's go corner. Not the best classic cornerback. Why don't we start at the top, though? We just asked Charles Davis this. If I gave you your druthers and there was no mitigating factors, Travis Hunter, is he a corner or a receiver for you?
He'd be a cornerback for me, and that's because I think that his ability is more rare at the cornerback position. Now, it's actually kind of funny because I've been having these conversations with people over the last couple of days. If Travis Hunter wants to go number one overall, I think if he were to be just viewed as a corner, that actually hurts his case, right?
I agree with that.
Whereas if he was a wide receiver, I think he might actually have a case at going number one overall.
Well, that's why he's going to be a corner and also play 20 snaps at wide receiver.
That's what I think that he should do. You know, it's funny, just going through the positions the way that we do, I go through full scouting reports for wide receiver before I get to cornerback, and I watched Travis Hunter just as a wide receiver, and I watched him, I went, and I was somebody who during the season, the whole time, I said to myself, he's a corner. I think he's a corner. And then I watch him hit his full scouting report as a wide receiver, and I go, dang, I liked him a lot as a wide receiver. So I was like, I don't know if I'm going to have as high of a grade. And then I watched him full time at corner. I went, all right, that's CB1. He's CB1 for me in this class. He is that talented. I think he is that good. He brings you true rare ball skills. He's got the long arms to him. But just more than all of this, Travis Hunter does not get as much credit as he deserves for how high IQ of a football player he is. He is such a smart football player, in my opinion. He understands the game at such a high level at both of these positions, and I feel as though the longer that he plays, the more that he plays, he will only get to that level where he just continues to master perhaps both of these crafts, but I think certainly at the cornerback position, he can be one of the best corners in the NFL.
Paul's going to do more corner. If he was just a wide receiver, is he your wide receiver one over Ted McMillan?
He's not. I would have
me neither. I'm with you.
I would have Ted over Travis, but it was funny. I was just talking to Sam Monson, who was with PFF, and now he's with 33rd team. He asked me, he's like, who's your wide receiver one? And I said, it's Ted. And he's like, I would have Travis. And I was like, okay, very interesting. And he even says some guys that I've been polling around Indianapolis say that they would have Travis Hunter as their wide receiver one. I'm still a Ted McMillan wide receiver one guy, but he's
a little unrefined with the route running, Travis. Which, by the way, he's playing 120 snaps a game. He's exhausted. Of course, your route running is not going to be that precise. I get it.
Yeah. Which is fine, but Ted's pretty rare to me. Like it's really hard for me to not get hyperbolic with the comps that I would have for him. Drake London, Mike Evans, AJ Green, right, with Tetro McMillan. It's hard to not think of those guys when you watch him play. So that's why he's still my wide receiver one.
Now, when John and I first started talking about the draft a little bit after the Giants season was over, initially my first glance was that Will Johnson would have to be the second corner, and I love this guy. And I even said to John, he'd be like top 5 for me. But then as I looked a little bit more, I saw that maybe there was some sketchiness there.
Yeah.
How do you feel about him? Is he generically the number 2 corner on most people's boards?
I think he's probably number 2 on most people's boards. He's corner 3 for me. So I just did a lot of cornerback reviews. Haven't done all of them, but I did it for about 15, 16 of these guys. I have Jahdae Barron, the corner from Texas, above him. So I have him as CB2, and I have Will Johnson as CB3. You know, just going off of kind of what you were saying there, I also had Will Johnson very high. He's top 5 player in the class going into the season. And the reason why is because when I watched Will Johnson, listed at 6'2", 200 pounds, he's got the long arms, I said to myself, okay, this is a man coverage, cat coverage type of a defender where you go, hey, just don't let that guy catch the ball, and he could be able to do it. I liked a lot of the reps that I saw against Marvin Harrison Jr. when they played against Ohio State, and so that gave me a lot of faith that he could be a great man coverage type of defender. Right. And then I watched a lot more of this year and a couple of games last year as well, and I went, I actually think he's more of a zone corner.
A lot of easy stuff gets caught in front of him.
I think he is much more of a guy where I think he's most comfortable keeping his eyes on the quarterback, keeping his eyes on the ball. I mean, the pick sixes sort of speak to itself of him being very comfortable and confident in more of an off-coverage role, whether it's a cover 3 role, whether it's a quarters role, whatever it is. And so with him not being as dominant as I thought he was in man, it's why I said, okay, well, I think he's a little bit more of a zone-heavy corner, which is fine, but it opened the door for me to say, I actually think I like Jahdae Barron a little bit more, even in that similar zone corner role.
And he's more of a slot, too, Barron, right? Did you see him as an outside guy, or did you see him as like kind of a slot safety combo?
So, 3 years ago, he's playing safety for Texas. 2 years ago, he's playing as that nickel defender. This year, he plays wide corner. I was very shocked when they said he was going to play wide corner going into this year, because I thought he was a slot. He can genuinely play outside now. I really do think that he has that total versatility to be able to play inside and out. I mean, just if he were to be a New York Giant, let's just say, the versatility that you would have between him and Drew Phillips would actually be fantastic, with both of those guys being able to play inside and out. So just a thought.
And then I feel like there's a pretty big gap once you get past those two guys to the next group of corners. Do you agree with that? And what do you think of the guys in that next group, and when value might be for those guys coming off the board?
I'm a Trey Amos guy.
Are you a Trey Amos guy?
I'm a Trey Amos guy from Ole Miss. I think that he's pretty dang good. I do. I think that he's got scheme versatility to him, and he's got long arms. He's got the build that you would want to potentially be able to play a lot of press coverage stuff at the NFL level. I think he is more comfortable and more impactful as that off-zone coverage defender, but very high forced and completion percentage over the last really couple of seasons when he's been out there, but really this year was his first full time being a starter there. So I'm a big Trey Amos guy. So I would say it's definitely those big three. And then I would probably put Amos maybe almost in a tier of his own, and then we get into some of the other cornerbacks after that. You get into a little bit more scheme-focused guys, man coverage corners, zone coverage corners, rather than these guys that you think might be able to do it all as first-rounders. But I'd throw Trey Amos in there as that back end of the first-round guy who's pretty scheme-versatile.
See, it seems to me last year's cornerback draft was much deeper than this year's. I mean, when the Giants got Drew Phillips last year, look, he's a darn good slot corner.
Right.
You're not finding somebody of that ilk that deep in this year's draft, are you not? I don't think so.
I mean, it just sort of depends. Like, I immediately, when you say, hey, who would be the Drew Phillips of this year? I wonder if Maxwell Hairston's that guy from Kentucky, right? Guy who could play inside out for you. He's kind of that projected second, third round pick, but, sort of to your point, there's only one of those guys, right? Only one team sort of gets that caliber of a player. So maybe you luck out and get a player like that the way that the Giants were able to when they got him on day 2. But there's just not a lot of there's not a lot of value overall, I think, at the cornerback spot. So it is a little bit more of a sort of pick your preference, pick your scheme, if you will, with that position this year as opposed to last year.
All right, let's go interior offensive line, which features a bunch of guys that played offensive tackle in college. And I guess that's kind of my first question for you, is that how many of these tackles in the end are going to end up being guards, and what's the sweet spot for trying to find that spot?
I think it's a really great question, because if you were to ask that question a different way, somebody asked me earlier today, he's like, hey, we talk about, all right, this offensive tackle, maybe he's a guard, maybe he's a center, whatever, and they just straight up asked me, he's like, who's just a tackle? Like, who's just a tackle in this draft class? I think there's two that come to mind immediately. Well, actually three, I think, that come to mind immediately. Ozzie Trapillo from Boston College. I think he, just the build, the length, everything, the experience with him at tackle. I think he is a tackle-only type of a guy, but more of a guy that's a day 2 selection rather than a first-round selection. I think Brendan Crenshaw-Dixon from Florida, playing a right tackle spot, played at San Diego State as well. I think he could be a guy who is just viewed as that right tackle type of a player. And then the other one is, he's a project, but Cam Williams from Texas, on the opposite side of Kelvin Banks, he's just straight up built like an offensive tackle. You really wouldn't, I don't think, move him inside because he's got such great length, such great size, but the technique is all over the place for him. He, I believe, led the country in holding penalties this year. So definitely a learning curve needed for him. But those three guys, and I mean, Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks, even Josh Simmons, Armand Membou, right? All these guys you could say maybe
Sabanea, Bursary,
all these guys I think you could say like could be guards or centers.
Even Connerly, a lot of people see as a potential guard instead of being a tackle.
I think he is one who it feels like he'll stick at tackle in the league, but I do agree with you. When I first watched him, I wondered if he was going to be an inside guy.
He's a little squatter, which he kind of has that look of
a little bit more of a squatty build. So
how about a thought on the most versatile lineman, Zabel? Who most guys think can play any one of the 5 positions. Now, does that versatility in some ways help him, or in other ways does it hurt him? Because if he had concentrated on one spot and teams said, you know what, he's going to be a great this, they might draft him higher.
I actually think that it mostly helps him. And certainly to what you're talking about, I think there are examples in different draft classes in different years where you can look at these players who, hey, you probably know they're going to kick inside a little bit, but then like you said, if you haven't been mastering that position, there's going to come a learning curve with you. But when I watch Zabel play as a center and a guard at the Senior Bowl, and how well he played it, and how well his footwork and his grip strength and his core strength all translated so quickly to those positions, I genuinely believe we should be talking about Gray Zabel the way that we talked about Graham Barton last year. Graham Barton went 26 overall to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That is what I think of Gray Zabel.
Had a good year.
Right, exactly. And it was the same thing. Graham Barton played left tackle for Duke for 2 or 3 straight years, and then he moved into center. He had played center a little bit when he was a true freshman at Duke, but it had been years since he had done that. Immediately goes to center in the league to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Zabel has been playing offensive tackle the last 2 years with North Dakota State. I think he'll immediately become a center in the NFL, but I believe that we should be talking about those guys in similar draft range and in similar light.
All right, how about the guard onlys? You talked about how few tackle onlys are there. Who are the guard onlys that you like? Because the Giants do have needed that spot, and it potentially could be a day 2 target.
Yeah, it's a lot of players who are going to be much later draft picks, I think. A lot of the guard-only guys are probably a lot of day 3 guys, but Tyler Booker's the one that's at the very top of the draft from Alabama. He's the guard-only player.
Donovan Jackson, too, right? Do you see him or do you see him as a guy that could swing out the tackle?
I don't. I think that he was playing there out of necessity from Ohio State, and it was a little bit like a Joe Tooney situation where they go, hey, we're going to coach you up on the technique, and we're going to teach you how to sort of like cut off speed rushers. But at the NFL level, I don't quite see him as like an Elijah Vera Tucker type of a player with the New York Jets where it's like, okay, he's a guard and we can play him a tackle in a pinch. I think that he is much more of a guard there. The Georgia guys, Dylan Fairchild, Tate Ratledge, I think both of those guys are guard-only type of players. They're center as well. Jared Wilson, I know we're talking about a different position here, but I feel like I think he could have a little bit of versatility to him. He's got some great athleticism, but like those 2 guys, Luke Kandra from Cincinnati, I think these are, again, like guard-only types of players there.
How about the Frazier, the guard out of LSU, Miles Frazier?
Oh, so I was not a big fan of Frazier coming into this season. Thought he played much better this year. I really do. I thought that he put his best foot forward this season. I do think that he is a guard-only type of a player, but it was his best year, I thought, of the years that I had watched.
And he was good in Mobile, too.
He was, 100%. I also think that his teammate, Emory Jones, a lot of people sort of went into this year and they were like, oh, look at LSU's offensive tackles, Will Campbell, Emory Jones. They've been starting since they were true freshmen, that pairing of offensive tackles. And I remember watching Emory and I was like, I think he can play, but I just don't think he can play at tackle.
There was some rough tape
much
this year.
More of a guard for him, and I think you start to mitigate a lot of the weaknesses if you stick him inside to guard. So that's what I think about him.
Now, we believe the Giants are going to go for offensive line depth, and we kind of think it might be on the interior because obviously at the moment they don't know Van Roten's coming back and they may have a hole at right guard. But I want to ask you, because you mentioned you love Zabel so much at North Dakota State, how about Jake Kubas last year, who came out, Giants grab him as an undrafted rookie free agent, and the coaching staff loves this kid to the point where he even got into the lineup at the end of the season. Where does he compare to the 3rd and 4th round guards in this draft? Should we be thinking more about him?
Well, I think that the answer to that comes down to, I was just talking about this with somebody earlier today. When you have undrafted free agents that hit, it is the fruits of a really good scouting process. Because in order to hit on an undrafted free agent, you have to have continuity between your scouts, between the coaches, and between the front office to be able to make all these things happen. Because when you get to undrafted free agents, you're either a little small, a little slow, don't have the strength. Something is holding you from being a draft pick. But if you can make an impact, that means that they gravitated towards likely the football player that you are. So all of that to kind of get around to your question, that to me would all come down to, do you believe that one of these guys who you would draft in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round has the mental makeup that's the same as an undrafted free agent who's able to crack the starting lineup? And if you do, then yeah, I think maybe you start talking about him in similar light. But if not, then you probably lean towards the guy that you already have on your roster that you know can outperform where he was drafted or wasn't even drafted.
Final question, regardless of position, where do you think you're going to find some players on day 3 here, rounds 4, 5, and 6, where guys are going to be left on the board where you're going to be cooking with a guy that maybe you can think about starting in a year or two?
Yeah, I think it's hard not to just say the defensive line because there's just so many good defensive linemen. I mean, I think of guys who are going to be day 3 selections just because there aren't enough picks in the top 100, you know, like an Anais Peebles from Virginia Tech, a Antoine Powell-Ryland from Virginia Tech, C.J. West from Indiana, Cam Horsley from Boston College.
Pegues is another guy, right?
J.J. Pegues from Ole Miss.
Like Stackhouse back there, too?
I mean, so I like the fact that, like, Stackhouse is obviously coming from a big-time program, big-time defensive line. I think he's going to be an end-of-day 3 type of a guy, but obviously somebody who might be able to fill out a roster and be a preferred practice squad player for you just because he's coming from such a good program that
I like
has so
his
much
teammate
success.
Brinson better.
Brinson, yeah, I mean, like Brinson, I think both of those guys are sort of in the same light, but like, yeah, there's just there's so many of those guys in this class where I even look at my own rankings and I go like, I can't be this low on him, can I? And then I was scrolling a little bit above and I was like, oh, I wouldn't put him over this guy, wouldn't put him over this guy, and it's just that is how deep edge rush and interior defensive line is this year.
Trev, good stuff, my man. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Yeah,
have fun, and we'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it, guys.
Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus, Jordan Reid, when we return right here on Big Blue Kickoff Live.
3, 2, 1, look up.
You got to get padded up. Let's do it.
Wow, what a catch! Ridiculous!
All right.
I'll show you my arm. This is my bedroom. I'm leaving? Yeah, I'm freaked out a little bit. Good meeting you, Pete.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here. Where are you? What kind of piece of show is this? This wouldn't happen on Kimmel.
Year 2, and I finally got an invitation, so thank you.
Well, you know we're here to race, though.
Yeah, but we're not going to race this car.
Oh, no.
Killer.
We're back here on Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Schmeelk, Dottino, joined by friend of the program, Jordan Reid from ESPN. Jordan, how are you, man?
I'm good. Happy to be here talking New York Giants football.
And some draft prospects as well. So we had a long conversation a couple weeks ago on the Giants Huddle podcast talking about the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl. But now we're going to get a taste of everybody this week, right? Yeah. And let's start, because all the Giant fans want to hear about it, are the quarterbacks at the top. I know you're more of a Cam Ward guy than a Shador guy. You're on the same page as Paul and I in that regard. How do you see that position playing out in the draft this year as you talk to more people here in Indy and kind of get a feel for what that marketplace might look like?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Of course, it starts with the Titans at #1 overall. So whatever they elect to do, and what you're hoping if you're the Giants is that one of the 2 teams at the top, they go with Abdul Carter, just because that will leave them with the quarterback at #3 overall, whether it's Cam Ward or Shador Sanders. So as of right now, still don't have word as far as which way the Titans are leaning right now. We probably won't find out until the card is turned in on draft day. But if you're the Giants, you're crossing your fingers that Abdul Carter goes somewhere in those top 2 picks.
Well, I want to follow up real quick, Paul. Do you have enough of a gap? I do. Between Ward and Sanders, where you think, all right, if it costs me 2 2s to move up a couple spots to 1, that you would pull the trigger? Because look, the Titans, if they go down to 3, they can still get one of the top 2 talents in the draft, whether it's Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, right? So that to me makes sense for Tennessee. It would make sense for a team like the Giants if, they don't get a veteran in free agency, however that ends up going on. Would that be worth the bang for your buck? Do you have Ward enough of a gap ahead of Sanders for you?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I will be comfortable doing that if I'm the Giants, just because you're in desperation situation right now with the quarterback spot, and you have to find a way to get a young quarterback. You cannot escape this draft without a young quarterback, assuming they don't go the veteran route. So whatever the price tag is, now you don't want to overspend, of course, but if the price tag is reasonable for you to get yourself in range to get one of the 2 at the top, or even trade up to the #1 overall pick to get Cam Ward, I would be comfortable doing that.
Jordan, we know the teams at the top are doing ad infinitum research on the QBs. They can even tell you how many eyelashes they have on each eye, okay?
Yeah.
That's the way it goes these days, right? But what do you think the odds are that a team's grade or portfolio on one of these top 2 QBs is going to change between the meetings here at the Combine, the pro days, the visits? Do you think there's going to be much movement, or do you suspect everybody's pretty much locked in as to who they think 1 should be and 2 should be?
Well, I think things are always going to be fluid, especially when you're talking about quarterbacks, just because they still have to do board work here at the Combine. They're going to take them through private workouts as well with the top 30 stuff, so that will give them another opportunity to add some more stuff to their draft portfolio. So I think they're not locked into anything right now just because the process is so fluid. They really haven't even met either one of these guys right now.
The reason I ask you that, though, is because most of the people who say Cam Ward say there's a gap. And if there's a gap, chances are Sanders on those boards isn't going to be able to overtake him.
Yeah, well, from our side, of course, just because we're not going to be able to sit down and actually go through an actual formal meeting with these guys. So most of our stuff is just tape and then, speaking to sources and, scouts within the league and how they feel about them and just asking them questions. How was their meeting? So for me, like I said, there's still a gap between the two, but it is always fluid as an evaluation.
All right, Jordan, this is the last thing on the quarterbacks, then we'll move on to the other stuff. Going into this, I would not feel comfortable with 3. I got to be honest with you, picking Sanders over Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. I just feel like there's a huge gap for me there in terms of how the players are graded. So if I'm the Giants, knowing that you might not have access to Cam Ward, like last year, they tried to move up to draft a quarterback, sometimes you just can't do it. They have to walk away in free agency then with a quarterback they feel good about starting week 1. So you don't get put into a position in the draft. And now maybe the Giants will have Sanders ranked that high. I don't know how they view him as a player, where you have to take a guy out of a tier and move him ahead of a potential awesome player just because you need the position.
Yeah, like I said, they got to figure out a way to come out of the draft with the quarterback. Assuming, like I said, they don't go the veteran route. But let's say they do sign a veteran. Now that puts you in position to take a Travis Hunter or an Abdul Carter or somebody like that.
And then there are quarterbacks later that you could pick to develop, right?
Yeah, there is. There's Kyle McCord. I like him as a developmental guy. Depending on how you feel about Jalen Milroe and his ability to become more consistent as a passer. Tyler Shuck is somebody that a lot of people in the league really like a lot as well. Right. And even though they may not have the upside of those other guys, maybe you go the veteran plus a young quarterback route.
The Giants have made it clear about their priorities, right? Get the quarterback, enhance the defense, especially the rush defense, help with depth on the offensive line, and they need more depth at corner. Now, knowing the depth of the draft, especially at defensive line, defensive tackle, would you be more inclined to draft a couple of those guys and maybe look to free agency or trades for the other spots?
It just depends on how you feel about this defensive line class. I feel great about this year's defensive line class.
Seems like everybody does.
I think it's absolutely loaded. So, and I've said the same thing about running back as well. Like, even though you don't need or have a need at those positions, take one anyway. That's how loaded this year's draft class is. And they obviously have a need at defensive line, so I'm sure they're going to select one, whatever pick it may be. So they need a defensive lineman, and I would not be hesitant at all to pick one, especially in this year's crop.
What's the sweet spot for corner? Like, at what point do we fall off a cliff and you're like, all right, we're in trouble here? What's the sweet spot for finding a guy that can help you specifically on the outside? Because I think they really see Drew Phillips as their nickel.
Once we get into like the 4th round, that's where I believe there's like a precipitous drop off after that. Just because round 2 is really where I have a big cluster.
Who do you have in
now?
there?
Benjamin Morrison of Notre Dame, Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky, Azariah Thomas out of Florida State. He's another. So there's a lot of guys in that cluster of 2nd-round picks right now, and now they could differentiate themselves out of that cluster just because we still have the combine to go. We have a lot of meetings to go as well throughout the process, but right now there's a huge clump of guys on day 2.
Now, I don't suspect the Giants will be looking for a tight end, but in your recent writings for ESPN, you've listed tight end as one of the top 3 positions in this draft. Specifically, it's more of the receiving tight ends. It seems that have, kind of made their mark in this draft. Would you think that they're that good that maybe you just take one anyway at one point during this draft because they could be that good?
You can never have too much depth at any position in football, no matter what it is. And even if you don't have a need, just take one anyway. Just because we just saw the Philadelphia Eagles stack resources at defensive line, and it's paid off for them. So even though you may not have a need, I like Theo Johnson. I was a big fan of him coming out. But maybe they go with a blocking tight end like a Jackson Hall out of Georgia Tech. That's a really good player. C.J. DeFree out of Alabama. That's another good player as well. So even though you may not have an immediate need, go ahead and take one, even though you don't have an immediate need there.
How do you tier out this top group of players? Like, I see it as you have your two, right, Carter and Hunter, they kind of, then you have a gap. How big is your next group? And then how massive is, like, the third tier where you end up one team have a guy at 18 and another team has him at, like, 50?
So there's 3 blue-chip guys in this draft class to me. You mentioned 2 already, and Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. But I see Mason Graham as a blue-chip guy.
Thank you.
I think he's a franchise-altering defensive tackle. And, you know, he's not physically, he's not going to look as impressive as some of these other guys.
Which is why I have him at the top of my next group, by the way.
He's not unblockable. Would you tell him he's
not going to be that guy you pick up first in a pickup basketball game. He's not going to be the first pick in that. But when you turn on the tape, he just beats everybody.
He's great.
He just beats everybody. So those will be the 3 blue-chip guys in this year's draft class to me. After that, it's a little bit of a drop-off after that. But once we get into like the 3rd or 4th round in this year's draft class, that's where things get a little bit sketchy.
How many guys do you have like top 10 in any draft class in this group? Is it just those top 3 and then everyone else would be out of the top 2?
Just those top 3.
So you think board's going to be very different then, right? Once you get past those top group?
I mean, you know, Will Johnson has an argument, the corner out of Michigan. He has an argument to be top 10 across multiple drafts, but those 3 blue chippers at the top, those are the 3 in this year's draft class.
So many times we come out here and we're talking about the wide receiver class. Nobody's really talking about the wide receiver class this time
We've been spoiled the past few years.
Is that because that they were that good and they've kind of warped our senses of how good these guys can be?
Yeah, and that's all it is. We've been so spoiled with really great receiver classes over the past 4 or 5 years or so. We've seen guys go top 10, top 15 consecutive years, but this year there just isn't that marquee talent like we've seen in years past. And I like Tedero McMillan, the receiver out of Arizona, but there's not a lot of people that see him as that bona fide top 10 or top 12 top pick, the type of pick right now. And there's other players that I think are more so wide receiver 2s on the next level, like Luther Burden III out of Missouri, Emeka Ibuka out of Ohio State, Matthew Golden out of Texas. A lot of those guys are glorified wide receiver 2s on the next level.
Do you think you can find, what besides those guys, startable, good solid wide receivers on day 2? Or do you think they're going to get pushed up because it's shallower at the top?
I mean, I think we'll see a run on those guys probably somewhere, I would say, in between pick 60 and pick 90. So probably late 2nd, early 3rd round.
That's like the Iowa State guys will be in that mix, right?
Like Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State is one that we've talked about plenty. I like Ricky White out of UNLV. He's probably more so of a round 3 or round 4 pick. But
he was good at the Shrine Bowl.
Yeah, he was absolutely terrific. But there's a lot of depth if you're looking for wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 types in this year's draft.
And what I like about it too, Jordan, is that a lot of these receivers are 6 feet, 6'1" and up. This is not a draft for shrimpy, slot wide receivers.
Yeah, as a former quarterback, trust me, we always like those big, tall guys that even though you may throw an inaccurate pass, they can just tower over everybody and just go up and get the ball.
We know how position value rules the day in the NFL these days, Jordan, right? But because you have so few players at premium positions at the top of draft boards in this year's draft, are we going to see tight ends, running backs, maybe safeties? Emin Wari is a guy we haven't talked about yet. Kind of get pushed up a little higher than they normally would in the draft because there are not enough premium players at the top of these draft boards?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really unpredictable first round, and that's starting at number 1 overall. We don't know who's going to go number 1, but with there being so much questions after those top 3 guys that we talked about a little bit earlier, we're going to see a lot of players that maybe were projected to go in the back end of the first round that could go even higher. That's why I said there's going to be so much unpredictability with this year's draft class, just because there isn't a lot of bona fide guys that we know or blue chippers like we saw last year.
Can you get a feel at all for how many NFL teams look at Travis Hunter, who you have number 1, I believe, on your board, more as a corner? How many think more of a receiver? And how many think going in, you know what, we're going to have some substantial snaps for him on both sides of the ball?
Well, it just depends on who you ask, honestly. There's going to be a mixed bag
of
opinions.
Is it split third?
It's
do
split.
You think?
It's split. And, I mean, just listening to some of the GM interviews that were sharing their opinion about Travis Hunter, there was a lot of people that said I would start him at corner. There were some other people that said I would play him at wide receiver. But it's a good problem to have.
Where would you put him?
I would put him at corner.
Me too.
I would play him at corner full time, and I would sprinkle him in maybe 20 to 25 plays a game at wide receiver, just because outside of Troy Brown, when he was playing for Belichick, I've never really seen anybody that's been a full-time receiver but part-time at corner. There's been a lot of part-time corners that have played sparingly at wide receiver, so I would feel more comfortable in that aspect with him.
And I wouldn't sleep on his return skills either.
No, not at all. I think he's rare. I mean, I've said this to everybody. The only comparable player, and I'm going to continue to use this comp for him, is Champ Bailey when he was coming out of Georgia in the late 90s.
That's a good
He's
one.
the only other player to average over 100 snaps during his career, and he's wearing a gold jacket right now. I believe Travis Hunter has that type of rare ability.
Last one for me. Giants need a guard, a right guard specifically. They have a hole there on their offensive line. Who are maybe some of the day 2 guards that you like starting at 34 with the Giants pick that should be in the mix for them there?
There's a couple. Jonas Savanea out of Arizona is one that I like quite a bit. He has experience at right guard and right tackle. Played primarily right tackle last year, but I view him as a guard on the next level. Emory Jones is a guy that's probably late second, early third round pick out of LSU. He's another that played right tackle, but I believe he's a guard on the next level. So those are 2 names that I definitely would key in on.
Awesome. Great, Jordan. Good stuff, my friend. Enjoy the rest of your day. You can find anything new coming out on ESPN this week?
Yeah, so I have my mock draft coming out next Tuesday, March 4th.
Post-combine.
So it'll be 2 rounds as well. So I'm excited to share that.
Okay, well, I want to go inside that real quick, and then I know you got to go. How much of that is done today?
I have not started it at all. It's all going to be what I'm hearing from here. I don't ever start my mock draft that I publish before or after the combine, I should say. I always wait.
Intel together,
I always wait till after.
So Monday's going to be a long day for you, basically what you're telling me.
Monday is going to be a very long day.
Very good, Jordan. Good stuff. Stay tuned. More Big Blue Kickoff Live presented by Cadillac when we return.
We got some cilantro, some onions, some carrots.
Giving back to the community means a lot. Just to keep giving hope that, you just living in a situation, the situation doesn't define you.
I got you.
Thank y'all.
You're welcome.
It's so nice of y'all.
Thank you.
Just little things like that just to keep encouraging guys.
All right, we're wrapping up Big Blue Kickoff Live presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants, right here at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. Schmeelk, Dottino with you. Paul, busy day at the podium today, long day. A bunch of defensive tackles did not come out that we wanted to talk to. Hopefully we'll get them tomorrow or the next day. We'll see how that goes.
Keeping them back.
And that tends to happen at this time.
Exams.
They get backed up. The guys run out of time before they can come out. So you had a couple guys you wanted to kind of talk about today that maybe fans want to hear about, and I got a couple guys too, and then we'll wrap things up.
Well, I mentioned my story about Mason Graham earlier, but I think Jordan Phillips out of Maryland, interesting give and take, and this is part of that intangible stuff, why coaches and scouts say they want to meet with guys, because you can see what you can see on tape, but when you meet with guys, sometimes you find a little bit more about them as a person. Now, this doesn't mean a whole lot, and it won't necessarily tell you where he gets drafted, but it's an interesting take on him. In about the 10 years or so that I've been coming to the Combine with you, John, it's roughly about that long, 8 years, whatever it is, I have never seen anybody ever say, while he was getting questioned at the podium, and this is a quote now, he goes, he was being fired at by a whole bunch of people. He always said yes, sir, to every single question, which I've seen some people do, but here's what was unique. At one point, a guy and a lady reporter both fired off the same question. He actually said, hold it. Sir, I apologize. Ladies first. I'd never seen that.
Why were you trying to talk over a woman reporter, Paul?
No, it wasn't me. It wasn't me.
I know. I actually was there. I saw that, too.
You saw that?
It was very polite.
He went out of his way to be super polite, super respectful. And, these guys are 20, 21, maybe 22 years old, John. And when you see that, it does tell you something about them.
Seems like a really nice kid.
Seems like an awesome, awesome guy. And he is thick, and he is stout like a fire hydrant, and he can play, and he's very active. I got a feeling that he's going to impress a lot of the people who talk to him in terms of his intangibles.
I enjoyed talking to Ashton Gillott out of Louisville, kind of a versatile, he said he sees himself as a 3-4 defensive end, but he can be a 4-3 defensive tackle. Oluwafemi Oladejo, who used to be a middle inside linebacker and now is an edge player, massive frame. That guy, I would love him as a second-round edge in this draft. I think he's a lot of upside still at that spot. David Walker, small school, I can't remember which one, but a FCS program. Really small guy, but he dominated the Senior Bowl, and he's small stature, but very impressive. Jack Sawyer is like central casting Midwestern linebacker guy, like literally central casting. Prince Uman Milayan is a guy that I enjoyed talking to. He was fun. Really looks the part in terms of a guy. He was at the Senior Bowl. Didn't have a chance to talk to him. Nick Scarradin, who's been one of my favorite guys in this process, though his tape this year wasn't as good. So he's played at 285. I asked him, he always looked a little heavy to me on tape, Paul. I said, what's your target weight? He goes, 265, that's what I am now. And I go, you played heavier than that, right? He goes, yeah, I played at 285. He want me to play at like the 4-eye or 5 technique. So I wonder with 20 less pounds on him if he's going to be a lot more explosive off the edge. So I thought that was interesting.
This is a couple of months ago.
Yeah, correct. So he's dropped 20 pounds. So I'm curious to see how he tests today at a lighter weight. I think he might test very, very well, which could push him into the first round.
Did I see you by Alfred Collins or no?
Yes, he's a very large man.
Isn't he?
Yes. But in a good way. He's not fat.
Correctly.
Correct, yes.
He, if you just do the eye test at the podium, that guy checks every box from the eye test perspective.
James Pearson, Jalen Walker, smaller guys.
Yes.
Jalen Walker, smaller frame, but man, he is built though. Like his upper arms and his shoulders and his chest, very well put together young man. Yes, absolutely, but not a huge frame. James Pearson
remind me of Slot.
He's skinnier. So,
slight.
Yes.
Slight is what I meant to say. Slight.
Speed rusher. Yeah. But he's a guy. Michael Williams, I thought, looked like the right frame for an outside backer.
I'd agree with that.
Remember, he's had shoulder surgery, so he's not been able to lift, so I'm not going to judge how thick he looks because I think the shoulder probably has reduced that ability. A lot of these linebackers are very small, Paul. Jeffrey Bossa is like a converted safety from Oregon, but they're all smaller guys except for Jihad Campbell out of Alabama, who looks like a defensive end to me in a linebacker's body. He's going to test off the charts this week. That's a guy I think you can kind of keep an eye on.
Paul was very impressive.
Yeah, I did not talk to him at all.
Very impressive gentleman. Talked about how he models his game after Greenlaw and Warner, two very impressive NFL players, and specifically talked much about how he loves having the green dot. He wants to be the guy to call the plays out there on defense, relishes that role. That kind of caught me a little bit okay, that's a good sign.
Darius Alexander out of Toledo, a small school guy, is someone that I enjoy talking to. He, I think, not a lot of sack production, but his tape's really good. He was great. The Senior Bowl, I know you had a lot of fun. And so did I, catching up with Howard Cross.
Always good to see little Howard, as they call him, at 285 pounds. I'm not so sure he's little, but we're looking forward to seeing what he does in the draft.
Absolutely. Paul, good times. We'll be back tomorrow at 12:30. Check out Giant Total Podcast. Daniel Jeremiah is up right now. Pearson will get Ian Rappaport on in a couple hours. We'll get that up. He is hard at work. He's making it happen. We'll have her playbook later on in the week as well. We're going to have a couple more insiders, huddles. It'll be a lot of fun. Make sure you stay tuned to Giants.com, Giants YouTube channel, Big Blue Kickoff Live, the podcast feeds, the app, all that stuff, as we continue our coverage from Indianapolis. For our entire crew, for Paul Dottino, for Madeline Burke, for all of our guests, I am John Schmeelk. We'll see you tomorrow at 12:30 for another live episode of Big Blue Kickoff Live on the Giants app and streaming live on the Giants YouTube channel.